The title of this lesson is A Very Agreeable Language. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at two simple phrases. We have a red book and a red house. Now, the word for red in Spanish is rojo. But if we compare these two phrases side by side, you can see that in Spanish we have un libro rojo, but una casa roja. It's clear from these examples that Spanish has altered the word rojo or roja to match the noun it is describing. And this is what I mean by Spanish being a very agreeable language. Spanish loves to agree. It loves for things to match up. Therefore, if you have a masculine noun, then words that describe that noun will change to match it. And the same goes for feminine nouns. So let's go back to our example here. Un libro. This is a masculine word ending in o. So the word that described it, red, will also end in o to match it. Un libro rojo. Whereas a house, una casa, is classed as a feminine word. So the word that described it changed to match this. Una casa roja. Let's look at another example. How do you say fantastic in Spanish? Fantástico. Now, how would you say a fantastic book? Un libro fantástico. What's the word for a party? Una fiesta. Now, how would you say a fantastic party? Una fiesta fantástica. Here you can see the same principle applying. We have a masculine noun, a book, un libro. So when applying a word to describe that noun, such as fantastic, it will end in o, fantástico. But for a party, una fiesta, now this is a feminine word, una fiesta. So fantástico changes to fantástica to match it. In a previous lesson called A Big Bonus, we looked at words ending in I-C-A-L, like identical. How would you say that in Spanish? Idéntico. Now let's look at two phrases. We have an identical book and an identical house. How would you say both of those in Spanish? Un libro idéntico. Una casa idéntica. Once again, the describing word is changing to match the noun it is describing. So, idéntico went to idéntica when talking about una casa. We also learned a word for happy. Do you remember what that was? Feliz. There are a few other options that you can use for happy in Spanish. Another one is the word contento. Reminds you of the word content in English, to be content. So here we have contento, and native speakers use this quite a lot to express that you're happy. So let's try to use it. A boy in Spanish is un niño, and a girl is una niña. So they're very easy to remember. Un niño, una niña. Now, if we want to say a happy boy, let's try to use that word contento. How would you translate it? Un niño contento. Now, how would you say a happy girl? Una niña contenta. So the word contento changed its ending to contenta when referring to una niña. Again, on the slide, you can see how it is matching. Spanish loves to do this. It loves to agree. It loves to match things up. So what this means is that you have options for words in Spanish. Red could be rojo or roja. Fantastic be fantástico or fantástica. Identical could be idéntico or idéntica. Content could be contento or contenta. Now, which one you use depends upon the noun you are referring to. That's why it's always very important when you are speaking Spanish that you are aware if the noun you are using is classed as masculine or feminine, because that will affect other words later on in the sentence. Finally, there's one last thing I would like to mention before closing out this lesson. How do you say big in Spanish? Grande. Now you can see that this word does not end in O or in A. It ends in E. So if we were saying a big book, it would be un libro grande. A big house, una casa grande. Notice that grande stayed stationary. It didn't change. In other words, you can't get grando or granda. If a describing word, such as grande, ends in an E like this, so it's neither O nor A, then it stays the same. You don't need to change it. This is why we have, as you can see on the slide, un libro grande, una casa grande. Here we have a masculine word and a feminine word, but grande stayed the same. The word for interesting in Spanish is interesante. Interesante. So here we have another describing word ending in an E. How would you say an interesting book? Un libro interesante. Now how would you say an interesting house? Una casa interesante. Once again, this word did not need to change to match the nouns it's describing. It stayed neutral, it stayed the same. In both cases, it is interesante. So there you have a short introduction to this very important concept of agreement in Spanish. There is more to cover, but we'll do that in upcoming lessons.